So thank you for joining this important breakout session where we will be discussing, as you know, the new tool that is called Moxidectin. That's for those of you that don't know, my name is Maria Rebollo, and I lead the global program for elimination of onchocerciasis at WHO. And today I am going to just introduce you to the person that is going to be our moderator for this session. Obviously, you all know him, but maybe for some of the younger folks in the room, they may not be that familiar with him. His name is Dr. Tony Yucchetti, a very good friend of mine. As you all know, he has been a great public health leader in the field of ophthalmology, and specifically for neglected tropical diseases. And he was my predecessor in WHO as one of the onchocerciasis coordinator or focal person in the department that previously was placed in the Department of Prevention of Blindness and Deafness before moving to the Department of NTDs. And during his time in WHO, he worked with many ministries of health across the globe, participating in advocacy, high-level activities, and creating new partnerships that helped definitely making a huge difference on the acceleration of control and elimination of onco. In his time in WHO, he also made a very important contribution that was leading the 2016 guidelines for elimination or verification of elimination of onchocerciasis, those guidelines that are so important for all of us and that are playing a critical role in the progress that countries made towards elimination, both in Latin America and in Africa. And since Tony retired from WHO, he has been involved in the last 3 years in several Moxidectin clinical trials in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where he's from. And he's providing technical support to ministries of health from Chad, DRC, South Sudan, and Uganda in the onchocerciasis elimination committees, focusing mainly in cross-border challenges. So we are very honored and pleased to have him today as our moderator, and I am just going to pass him the floor for leading us in this session. Thank you so much for joining again. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria, for these nice words. And I'm so happy to be back connected with all of you. And it is really an honor for me to moderate this session. First of all, allow me to wish you a good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I may say even good night for those from Australia, because I saw some participants coming from Australia. And this year, core NTD meeting on onchocerciasis will focus on Moxidectin, a new tool for accelerating onchocerciasis elimination, as Maria pointed out. We will start with a plenary session during which Sally will give us a background on Moxidectin and update on ongoing studies. Our center here in DRC is involved currently in 2 studies. And this will be followed up by a presentation on WHO guideline development with a summary of existing evidence and remaining questions, which will be given by, forgive me the pronunciation, Ziedzon from Ghana. Then George from WHO Afro will present an overview of progress towards elimination in Africa. And finally, Emika will share with us country perspective, the experience from Nigeria. As we know, most of the people at higher risk of onco are in Nigeria, so we will be glad to hear the Nigerian experience. Unfortunately, we will not hear from Mali, as it was shared earlier on by Lee's email. I think you all received that email. And after the plenary session, we will split into 3 breakout groups for 35 minutes. And before ending this year core NTD session on OCO, we will receive reports from the breakout session, and these reports will actually constitute the agenda of future research topics. Finally, allow me to briefly introduce these 4 speakers of our plenary session. The first one is Sally Kinrande. She is the Vice President and the project leader at Medicine Development for Global Health in Australia. Her current role at MDGH is to lead clinical, regulatory, and manufacturing and external liaison activities to enable access to Moxidectin for treatment of onchocerciasis and lymphatic filariasis. The second speaker from Ghana, I have trouble to pronounce the name. Forgive me for that. Dom. He is actually an associate professor in the parasitology department at Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research and at the University of Ghana. And he is actually the leader of the NTD research group within that institution. The third speaker, George from WHO Afro. He is actually working as a surveillance officer and data analyst at the expanded special project of the elimination of NTDs known as ESPEN. And the last for the day will be Emeka from Nigeria. He is a public health physician and the head of the National Onchocerciasis Elimination Program of that country. And this is it for the day. And I'm really happy to moderate once again. And Sally, as our first speaker, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, and enjoy your time. Is Sally around? Is the presentation from Sally around? Ready?
Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name's Sally Kinraid. I'm from the team at Medicines Development for Global Health. I'd like to take a few minutes to present to you a brief overview about Moxidectin as a new treatment for onchocerciasis and to update you on the current status and activities ongoing to enable its use. Data for Moxidectin supporting its use for treatment of onchocerciasis was reviewed and approved by the US Food and Drug Administration in June 2018, based on a solid regulatory package including a number of studies, preclinical safety, mechanistic studies, 6 phase 1 studies in healthy volunteers, and a pivotal phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trial in onchocerciasis infected individuals. This regulatory review also included approval of an extensive package of quality documentation on the manufacturing process for the Moxidectin 2 mg tablets, thus confirming that the tablets produced meet the highest quality standards. A certificate of pharmaceutical product issued by US FDA provides certification of the product quality and in a format recognised by WHO. I'd like to take you briefly through some of the data from the phase 3 study. In that trial, a single 8 mg dose of Moxidectin was shown to be significantly statistically superior to a standard dose of ivermectin in the reduction of skin microfilariae at all post-treatment time points out to month 18. Skin microfilariae were suppressed consistently in more people to a greater extent and for longer with Moxidectin, shown here in the bottom panel, at months 1, 6, 12, and 18, compared with ivermectin, shown here in the upper panel. In this figure, it's important to note that each data point represents an individual. There are approximately twice as many people treated with moxidectin as with ivermectin, so twice as many dots in the bottom panel. There was large variability in response to ivermectin seen, particularly evident at month 1 and occurring across all 4 study areas where the study was conducted and where there had been no prior exposure to ivermectin via CDTI. At 12 months after moxidectin, shown here in the 3rd column at the bottom, the proportion of people with any detectable skin microfilariae and skin densities that remained were lower than at 6 months and even 1 month after ivermectin. The adverse event profile for moxidectin was very similar to ivermectin in that phase 3 study. This slide is a summary of the adverse events reported during the first 6 months after treatment. The majority of events were mild or moderate. Adverse drug reactions, meaning any adverse event considered related to treatment, were all assessed as due to the host immune response to the dead and dying microfilariae. As all participants started the study with 10 or more mF per milligram of skin, the majority who received either treatment experienced at least 1 or more of these adverse events associated with the efficacy. These were not more severe in those receiving moxidectin compared with ivermectin, but did occur more frequently with moxidectin due to its greater efficacy. None of the serious adverse events after either treatment was assessed as related. There have been an additional 3 clinical trials with moxidectin, started with Medicines Development Sponsorship since the FDA approval. And these are being done to further inform the field use of moxidectin and its future inclusion in WHO guidelines and country policies. The first of these is a paediatric dose finding study for children below 12 years, and that's recently been completed with the participant visits finishing, and the data is now being analysed and will be presented at the upcoming ASTMH meeting. A study of annual or biannual repeat dosing with moxidectin or ivermectin over 2 years is ongoing, as is a large single-dose safety study conducted in adolescents and adults living in onchocerciasis endemic areas. Children below 12 years will soon be included in this study once the dose has been selected, the protocol amended, and a receipt for relevant approvals achieved. An initial study in people with lower infection has also been in progress this year, and the findings will no doubt be made available in the not too distant future. The WHO roadmap includes a recommendation for assessment of moxidectin in programmatic settings. This next step will take the form of pilot MDA projects in selected countries and areas. These pilot programs will inform the wider use of moxidectin and enable assessment of feasibility, acceptability, and the effectiveness of moxidectin as an alternative treatment strategy where this might be needed. Work towards inclusion of moxidectin in the WHO essential medicines list and in treatment guidelines, as well as processes to support its consideration for approval in affected countries, are underway. An additional necessary step is to find an appropriate solution to fund the ongoing supply of moxidectin to enable its donation to countries that need it to accelerate their elimination efforts. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I really look forward to the discussion throughout this workshop.
Yes, thank you very much.
Depending on your location. I'm presenting the initial analysis of a systematic review to guide the decision towards the development of a guideline for the use of moxidectin for onchocerciasis control. Given the time limits, I will go straight to the objectives of the review, with the primary objective being to assess the evidence on the efficacy and safety of the use of moxidectin for the control and elimination of onchocerciasis. The secondary objective looks at the efficacy and safety of moxidectin for the control and elimination of other filarial and helminth infections. The primary outcomes are partial and incomplete microfilarial clearance following treatment, the duration of clearance, and the microfilarial densities and range before and after treatment. While the secondary outcomes is the frequency and severity of adverse and severe adverse events. The review aimed to address the following PICOs referring to participant interventions, comparators, and outcome in answering the questions. And the following PICOs were identified to be addressed through the review. 1, can moxidectin be used for annual or biannual MDA to eliminate onchocerciasis in high use, not co-endemic for lower? The second question is whether moxidectin administered biannually can be more effective at accelerating the elimination of onchocerciasis compared to annual treatment in high use, not co-endemic for lower. The third question is whether annual or biannual moxidectin can be used in eliminating onchocerciasis in high use, co-endemic for lower. The fourth question is whether moxidectin can be used on an annual or biannual basis to eliminate onchocerciasis in high use, co-endemic for lymphatic filariasis. The fifth question is whether moxidectin can be used for annual MDA to eliminate LF in high use, co-endemic for onchocerciasis. And the sixth PICO question is the added impact of moxidectin for the elimination of other helminth infections in high use, co-endemic for onchocerciasis. This figure shows the PRISMA diagram flow for the identification of studies via registers and databases. We followed a systematic review methodology. A search was undertaken on the following electronic databases: BMC, PubMed, Medline, Cochrane, Google Scholar, Reporter, using the search terms moxidectin, onchocerciasis and its different variations, lower or lowiasis, lymphatic filariasis and its variations, elephantiasis, river blindness, W. Bancrofti, trichoria, Ascaris lumbricoides, Schistosoma hematobium, or Schistosoma mansoni, hookworm, and strongyloides. 139 publications were selected from the databases. 52 publications were discovered to be duplicates, and the non-duplicates were 87. Of these, 55 were not relevant, and the remaining 32 publications qualified after abstract screening. A full test screening was carried out, and 14 publications were identified. Of the 14 publications, 2 were related to onchocerciasis, 3 on strongyloides, 2 on trichoris, 1 on schistosomiasis, and 6 on pharmacokinetic studies, included mainly for safety analysis. There are other ongoing and planned studies described by Sally in her presentation. This figure shows the outcome of the analysis for the use of moxidectin versus ivermectin at 12 months. The forest plot is used in systematic reviews to summarize data from multiple papers in a single image. The 2 studies included were those of Awaji 2014 and Opoku 2018. For each study arm, that is moxidectin or ivermectin, we included the number of participants with complete data set and undetectable skin microfilarial density at 12 months, represented by yes, and the number of participants with complete data set and detectable skin microfilarial density at 12 months, represented by no. The odds ratios were calculated based on the numbers in each group. This analysis was done in Stata. Each study is represented by a point estimate of the results in the form of a square box. The horizontal line representing the 95% confidence interval of the study results, with each end of the line representing the boundaries of the confidence interval. The bigger the study, the smaller the horizontal line, and the smaller the study, the wider the horizontal line. The diamond is probably the most important thing you see on a forest plot. The diamond represents the point estimate and confidence intervals when you combine and average all the individual studies together. The vertical points of the diamond represent the point estimate of the average studies. The horizontal points of the diamond represent the 95% confidence interval. The red line is the line of null effect and represents the value where there is no difference between the two interventions. If any of the 95% confidence interval lines cross the line of no effect, there is no difference. In this case, none of the studies and the overall outcome cross this line and indicate a significant impact of moxidectin compared to ivermectin. In conclusion, the review indicates that there is an overall significant impact on the use of moxidectin versus ivermectin for the treatment of onchocerciasis. Only PICO question 1 and for moxidectin administered annually can be addressed with the data available. Other studies are ongoing to help address the remaining questions. In terms of safety, the data is comparable to that of ivermectin. I would like to acknowledge the support of Lee Hanley from Core NTD, Maria Ribolo, and Annette Kussel from WHO, and Sally Kinraid from Medicines Development for Global Health. Thank you very much.
My name is Jorge Cano. I'm working as data analyst and surveillance officer for the SPEN project at WHO Afro. I'm going to present a quick overview of the epidemiological situation for the onchocerciasis in the African region. I will also present the treatment progress made in the regions since the inception of onchocerciasis control programs and a simple exercise to identify areas which can be potential candidates for the use of moxidectin as an alternative to ivermectin in MDA interventions. Let's now present briefly the current status of the onchocerciasis in the Afro region. The map shows the current endemicity status at implementation unit level for onchocerciasis as reported by countries through the Joint Report 4 corresponding to 2021. It is remarkable that still 669 areas are of uncertain endemicity and that have not seen any MDA with ivermectin. An addition of 513 could also require their endemicity status to be confirmed, although their population have been under treatment with ivermectin through the LF program. Up until now, 122 areas have stopped NDA and are currently under surveillance. Using a recent model predicting the environmental suitability for onchocerciasis across the African region, which has been developed by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, we have seen that 38% of the areas that are thought to be eligible for onchocerciasis elimination mapping could have low suitability to very high unsuitability for the occurrence of onchocerciasis cases. This information can be useful to shrink the areas to be targeted for OEM. These maps show the endemicity areas that were under treatment with ivermectin in 2020 and in 2021. Treatment data for 2021 is still under review for 10 countries in the African region, including large countries such as the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Ethiopia. We can see in red the endemic areas that did not receive treatment this year. It's clear that the coverage of NDA in 2020 and 2021 fell comparing to the coverage achieved in previous year. This can be better visualized using a graph showing the progress on MDA since 2014. This graph shows the trend on the epidemiological coverage, which corresponds to the population treated over the population required treatment, and the geographical coverage, which is the number of implementation units that receive NDA over the number of implementation units in need for treatment. Although we still need to process the data for 10 countries, we observe a clear decrease in both indicators in 2021 comparing to 2020. This could partially be explained by a late introduction of restrictive measures to movement in the African region because of the COVID pandemic, which allowed many countries to implement the planned MDA in 2020, but hampering the MDA intervention in 2021. The lack of funding and support to conduct the planned MDA intervention may have also contributed to this fall in the coverage. In this regard, it's noteworthy mentioning the withdrawal of the UK funding to the ASTEM project in the African region. On the positive side, we have seen an increase in the population that no longer require treatment against onchocerciasis, from 7.4 million in 21 implementation units in 2014 to 32.2 million in 122 implementation units in 2021. Finally, when we analyze the history of NDA conducted in the onchocerciasis endemic areas, which is going back to early 90s in some countries of West Africa, we see that 74% of these areas have received more than 15 MDA rounds with ivermectin. Many of these areas might be ready to conduct stop surveys, although this should be analyzed IU by IU, since there are many factors that must be considered, such as the baseline prevalence, the continuity of MDA interventions, the coverage achieved in these MDA rounds, etc. Finally, I'm going to present an attempt to geographically outline areas that may be eligible for the use of moxidectin in MDA intervention. Although it's yet not clear what criteria should be considered when identifying areas to be treated with moxidectin, we could preliminarily focus on areas with ongoing transmission that had never received treatment with ivermectin or less than 6 effective MDA rounds. In addition, areas that, despite having gone through a large number of MDA rounds, more than 15 or 20 MDA rounds, have failed to reduce the intensity of transmission below a level at which the transmission is thought to be unsustainable. This map is an attempt to geographically outline the areas that might make good candidates for the use of moxidectin in MDA intervention. For example, areas of uncertain or unknown endemicity that had never received treatment with ivermectin, or endemic with LF that have only received a limited number of effective MDA rounds, upon having proved the transmission of onchocerciasis. In addition, a fraction of the 781 areas that have seen a large number of NDA rounds because of the persistence of transmission. This group could be narrowed considering the outcomes of recent impact assessment surveys, both epidemiological and entomological surveys. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Chukwuemeka Makata. I am the manager, Nigerian Onchocerciasis Elimination Program. And I'm here to make a presentation on Moxidectin, a new tool for accelerating onchocerciasis elimination, the Nigerian perspective on the new tool. So the background of our program shows that our program was launched as a control program in 1988. The launching or at the inception of the program, the inception program objective was control. But as time went on, the objective shifted from the control to elimination in 2012. The elimination strategy was based on mass administration of drugs through community-directed treatment with ivermectin. At the beginning, there was an endemicity mapping, which was done using the rapid epidemiological mapping for onchocerciasis. That showed that about 50 million people in over 40,000 communities across 32 states, plus the Federal Capital Territory, were estimated to live at the risk of onchocerciasis in Nigeria. You can see this is the implementation status of Nigeria onchocerciasis program as at the moment, whereby the color indicates the different stages of implementation across the whole states in the country. When the treatment with ivermectin started, it started going up gradually at a point where we had a serious spike because of change in strategy, when we stopped treating based on circumscribed community to be treating the entire local government. And that's why you can see the graph there, and it went up and it has been coming down ever since then. State of implementation of onchocerciasis in Nigeria. 2 states have eliminated onchocerciasis. That's Plateau State and Nasarawa State. 4 states have stopped MDA. 9 states are on course to stop MDA. 13 states are on track for onchocerciasis elimination. Transmission is ongoing in 1 state, while inefficient information for implementation decision. We don't have much information in about 6 states, and these things are clearly spelled out by the legend, the implementation status map that I showed earlier. So our plan as at the moment is to conduct MDA surveys, stop MDA surveys in the eligible transmission zones, to conduct onco elimination mapping in the blue states, and to conduct pre-stop MDAs in eligible states as well. We are also primed to conduct a Moxidectin trial and possibly to commence MDA using the drugs if necessary. The takeaway from introduction to Moxidectin, as we were exposed to it a couple of months ago by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is that Moxidectin suppresses skin microfilaria in more people to a greater extent and for longer time than ivermectin. Moxidectin shows superior microfilaria suppression versus ivermectin at all measured time points. It has a much longer half-life than ivermectin, giving it greater potential for sustained microfilaria suppression. Moxidectin also has similar adverse event profile to ivermectin, and modeling shows that Moxidectin will eliminate onchocerciasis faster than ivermectin. So when you look at it, we try to put drugs side by side. The issues that goes for them. This is not a complete SWOT analysis, but just you can see that under ivermectin, the current status is that it is donated freely. We have guaranteed supply of ivermectin. It's already achieved name recognition amongst the CDDs as well as the people who take the drug. There's a minimum documented adverse effect in Nigeria. We don't have much issues of lower endemicity. There is also long years of administration, which almost all the transmission zones in the state have attained that number of years. The drugs are known to CDDs, and it's a bit of a long shelf life. So put side by side with Moxidectin, you see it's a question that those are yet to be answered. But in terms of minimum documented adverse effect, they are comparable, and that probably is shorter in terms of years of administration. The efficacy profile of ivermectin appears to be better than ivermectin. So the national perspective on the use of Moxidectin is that Nigeria has a remarkable progress in onchocerciasis elimination program. Many transmission zones are at the verge of stopping MDA. One transmission zone is suspected to be active. Some transmission have not been mapped, and the zones present opportunity for field trial of Moxidectin. So in conclusion, the national program has identified areas for possible field trial for Moxidectin, and we are working out modalities for field activities with the support of partners and funders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for our 4 speakers. As you have followed up, the first 2 speakers showed us the value of moxidectin and how it can be considered as a new tool for the elimination of onchocerciasis. And the last 2 speakers, they showed us clearly some areas within the continent, some countries within the continent, and within each endemic country, we have also some areas, provinces, states, districts, where we still have challenges of eliminating diseases, comprising also the cross borders between countries. So we got the necessary information now to lead us to go into breakout sessions. And we do have 3, as we said before. The first breakout group will deal with the country concerns with moxidectin as a strategy. As you know, we want to know the feasibility issues, the sustainability of the product, and that group will address this question. And the second breakout group will try to look at the evidence needed by WHO in order to have a formal guidance which endemic countries will be following. And the third breakout group will try to determine where moxidectin will add the most value we need. So these are the topics for your breakout groups, and we will spend 35 minutes in those breakouts groups, and after that we'll come back and be ready to hear the reports of your outcomes discussion. Thank you very much once again for these presenters who have given us the some guidance in how we are going to discuss within the breakout sessions. Thank you very much, and then see you in about 35 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had great discussions within the breakout group. And now I think it's time to hear from the rapporteurs from those different groups. We will start with the group number 1, which had to discuss about country concerns. I don't know who has been chosen as the rapporteur. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. This is Louise Hamill from Group 1. I was sort of moderating and facilitating the discussion, so I will give our quick report. We considered what were the main barriers from the country perspective to using moxidectin in community-based settings in the next 2 to 3 years. And we had great feedback around, there's concerns around how to get moxidectin registered in country. So beyond having that FDA level approval, which is obviously really great and needed, how do countries get their own in-country approval and what support's available there? A lot of sort of discussion around the pediatric dose, when that would be available. Otherwise, in the community setting, using ivermectin for kids and then moxidectin for older kids and adults would be a bit difficult. There was a sort of a question that's popped up in a couple of places about the desire for WHO guidance. And there was a question and great discussion about what was the effective coverage for moxidectin that should be aimed for. and having clarity in that would really help remove barriers to implementation. We also had feedback from everyone and country perspectives on situations or locations where that could be best suited for moxidectin use, and it was suggested that high transmission hotspots, untreated endemic areas, IUs where biting rate is increasing, insecure areas, and areas with high seasonality of transmission could be good for use of moxidectin. There would be particularly benefit there over other areas. On sort of the maybe the more support and sustainability, there was comments around again having WHO recommendations and guidelines, or at least letting country know what the pathway and the timeline to have those things are, because I think we can all understand that they're not available now, but knowing what the likelihood of that timeline might be could help countries in their decision making. And sort of moving on from the situations that we discussed, it would be good to have maybe interim advice on criteria to guide the switch from ivermectin to moxidectin. I think that's some of the main points. There was also some discussion on like the safety data, which went into some detail, and sort of standardization of safety reporting structures that should be used when countries are thinking of trialing moxidectin. So that's a summary of some of the things that were discussed in breakout group 1. Thank
you. Thank you, Louise, for this summary from your group. And I will give a summary of all the recommendations and questions raised later. And let us move on to the second group, which discussed the issue related to the evidence needed by WHO for formal guidance. You have the floor.
Hello, my name is Millicent, and I'm going to give a brief summary of what we discussed. So in relation to the evidence that were needed, we had 4 questions that we looked at. So we looked at the fact that whether the data available was sufficient for us to use moxidectin. But then questions were raised on the available data we had. So currently there aren't enough data on the use of moxidectin in children. So it would have been nice to have the analysis, completed analysis for trials that are being done in children, and also the completion of trials in areas that have lower MF in their settings. And then we moved on to look at the evidence that's available. We have safety data, but then we need more phase 3 clinical trials that will look at larger numbers and also look at severe adverse effects in the larger cohort. And I think there was someone mentioned that there are data, people are doing trials. So there are ongoing trials that are looking at over 10,000 people. So when that becomes available, then I think we would have that larger number to compare. And then there was the need for us to look at the safety threshold for use of moxidectin in areas with lower. So if we are going to use lower in areas with, we are going to use moxidectin in areas with lower, then we would have to look at the threshold values for us to use moxidectin. And there was also the evidence on enough human data to look at adverse events that may hinder the rollout of moxidectin. And then we looked at what requirements will be needed by countries to roll out moxidectin. And then there was the question of training. So usually when programs are being rolled out, there's the need to train people who will carry these out. And then which areas we will need to prioritize this moxidectin use. And then for priority research areas, I think one thing that stood out was economic analysis of the cost of ivermectin versus moxidectin, whether it was going to be cheaper to use moxidectin and how many rounds will be necessary to eliminate onchocerciasis, how many rounds of moxidectin will be needed. And then for onchocerciasis and the MICT, usually for some areas, they are reporting epilepsy as well. So will moxidectin be useful? And then the impact of moxidectin on black fly, whether it would also have an impact on black fly. And so basically, these were what we spoke about. And then we also spoke about the need for modeling data with the evidence on the use of moxidectin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for these outcomes. And let us move on to the last breakout group. The floor is yours. And before we start rounding the session of the day.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So the session was facilitated by Alex Pavluk and myself. It was a rich discussion. One of the things in the discussion was the importance of having good coverage and adherence, because however good a treatment may be, if the levels of adherence are poor, then it may not work, and then it may derail the implementation of the alternative treatment strategy. So there was a consensus that not only perhaps looking at levels of number of treatment rounds that had been achieved or with which coverage, but maybe some coverage surveys could be done in the terrain to ascertain the real level of adherence that would ensue with moxidectin. Obviously, we also discussed a lot the issues of the acceptability of a new treatment, and also the importance of having the pediatric dose when we are going to proceed to MDA to avoid confusion, to avoid mistakes. Children with something like ivermectin, then the other ones with moxidectin, we thought that the mistakes may be made, and it would be important that if we start with a pediatric dose and we can treat all the groups in the same way. Another very important point was the issue of moxidectin and pregnancy, because obviously pregnancy and ivermectin has been discussed, and the treatment programs are supposed to exclude pregnant women, but maybe they have treated at scale many women that have been pregnant, not knowingly at the time. But what happens to moxidectin? Can we then consider that, can we translate directly from the clinical trials where pregnancy tests were done and etc. to the terrain where these tests won't be done, and what is then the contribution of untreated pregnant women if that were the case? We obviously discussed the financial considerations, of course, the costs. So it's all very well to look at the evidence in terms of modeling, etc. But at the end of the day, how are we going to be able to scale up? What are the financial considerations? That was also discussed in plenary. And then in the retro board, also what is the empirical evidence that annual moxidectin is better than annual moxidectin, say. And again, in the plenary, we have discussed that some of the clinical trials, phase 3B, phase 4 clinical trials, will have to shed some light on that. But yeah, thank you. That was a summary. Obviously, please, anybody attending the session, if you want to add something that I didn't capture, please go ahead. Thank you.
Is there anyone from the last group who want to add something before we just summarize the whole session? If there is none, we have 3 minutes remaining in order to complete the session of the day. And I'd like really to thank all the presenters from the breakout groups. You did a great job. And as you can see from the reports, we have so many issues which were raised regarding the registration of the drugs, the pediatrics doses, and also the issue regarding the coverage. WHO needs to provide guidance to the countries and where to treat areas such as areas with insecurity. We do still have them, and my own country is one of them. And the sustainability issues to be addressed by the guidelines. And we need also to look at the safety data and follow up, the issues regarding the pediatric dosage came again during the second group, the lower and endemic areas, and also to see the follow-up on the larger safety of the drug. And we need still have data on that, and then the requirements by the countries. And finally, other issues, the number of rounds in order to eliminate the disease, areas with a lot of cases of epilepsies, and is there any impact on black flies, so on. And I think lastly, we heard things related to the pregnancies, and myself, I'm facing them here in the field. So we are still collecting data, and also the issue related to the finance. So this is just a kind of general ideas which came out through our discussions. I really want to thank each one of you for your time in order to give us enough information for the next step during the next year for all of us who are involved in trying to address onchocerciasis issues. As we know, more than 4 decades, we have been there to try to address the issue, and hopefully, we will meet the WHO roadmap 2030. Thank you very much. I think I've finished now my role as a moderator. I'm excited, and thank you very much for a very good session. And back to you, Lee.
Nothing else from me, Tony. I really appreciate you moderating the session and look forward to seeing everyone at the closing plenary. Thank you all.